Do you know anything about space? Can you educate me in the ways of space?
Okay, first of all, my heater just turned on. Are you picking that up, Chris?
Maybe.
Is it a space heater?
This time we watched Season 7, Episode 4, The Incredible Melting Man.
The Ted Cruz story.
Oh, but first, some news. Adam, you have a new podcast.
It's about time. Yes, myself and my friend Sarah Chamberlain have started a podcast on Canadian horror movies called A Part of Our Scaritage.
Amazing.
Yes, we'll be looking at different random Canadian horror movies, essentially dating all the way back to the earliest ones to more present-day affairs. Currently, we've got a batch of 3 that will be out by the time this episode drops on Ginger Snaps, that Canadian favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a slasher movie that's really about women aging called Curtains.
Great.
And, of course, an anthology movie about killer cats starring, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance.
Now, do you have any working theories yet about what makes a Canadian horror film uniquely Canadian?
Yes, the money is multicolored. That's the dead giveaway.
Nice.
Every now and then you see a $5 bill that someone has painted Wilfrid Laurier's scalp so that he has Spock's haircut. That old chestnut. Yes, you can find those. That's going to be a bi-weekly show, and you can find it at megaphonic.fm/scare.
So be sure to subscribe.
Or you'll be cursed.
We have some other follow-up. We got a couple of great letters and contacts this week.
Whose contacts did you get?
Devoted listener Jeff on Twitter confirms that as an aerospace engineer, he says, I can definitively state that bees are not planes.
Now, Jeff, where do you stand in terms of hornets being helicopters? Because I'm not convinced.
We also have something from listener Nathan.
Yes, Nathan wrote into us about Robot Monster, and he mentioned the weird fantasy covers that are in the film, and the reason why the movie feels so, strange. The monster isn't threatening. The adults don't feel authentic. And that's because, of course, the whole film is from the little boy's POV, since he is in effect dreaming the whole thing. Or is he? I love to compare this film to the comic series Axe Cop by the Nicole brothers. When he started, Ethan Nicole, the artist, was struggling to come up with a good story for a comic. He would play with his much younger little brother, and he marveled at little Malachi's imagination. From their play, he put pen and ink and came up with this surrealist comic only capable from a young mind at play.
Yeah, it has a dream logic to it, and especially, even its depiction of romance seems to have a vaguely teenagery perspective on it.
Romance, as in a capital R and a capital M?
Indeed. It certainly holds much together than this movie, spoiler alert. So,
well, this movie definitely could have used a gorilla wearing a diving helmet. God bless this movie. I haven't read Axe Cop, but one of the things that I definitely got reading that book, I cannot yet I must, about the making of the film, is that clearly Phil Tucker had the mind and heart of a child. Hence his delightful origin story of Roman by saying it stands for Robot Man. And when asked what that stood for, he said, I don't know.
So I've been reading Axe Cop based on the advice of this letter, and it's quite delightful, quite a lot of fun. I picked up the first volume of the collected Axe Cop comics, and the introduction is done by a man named Kevin Murphy.
What?
So that's all the more reason to go pick that up.
Our last letter from our devoted listener, Sean. He writes about MST3K's use of film serials, and he says, for my money, the must-see serial of the era was The Phantom Creeps. Bela Lugosi is a mad scientist who wants to be left alone to science insanely, but he's forced to unleash his squad of tarantula death troops to deliver bombs to those who would stop this science-y fun.
So that sounds delightful. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen The Phantom Creeps, but I know it as kind of a bit of pop culture flotsam. Rob Zombie, he created a song devoted to and inspired by The Phantom Creeps. And for his like live performances and Halloween shows, he would have recreations of the Serial's staggeringly stupid looking robot stomp around on the stage. Yeah, it's got kind of a metallic body, but like a big goblin head with pointed fangs and everything. Oh God, it looks amazing.
All right.
Plus, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. I give two fucks for Bella.
Well, I'm glad somebody does.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, there's this movie.
It's goofy, it's gross, and it's fun for the whole family.
This time we did The Incredible Melting Man. The movie opens with a George Lucas-like starfield, tricking the viewer into thinking the movie they're about to see will be a thrilling space adventure. But except for the first couple of minutes, in which a trio of astronauts are irradiated by Saturn's rings, this movie takes place almost entirely in some industrial park in San Fernando Valley. One of the astronauts, Colonel Steve West, has survived the blast, but it has left him covered with a tangy barbecue sauce. Steve prefers a Memphis-style dry rub, and in his rage he chases down and kills a nurse, and then a fisherman, in quick succession. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Dr. Ted Nelson reasons, based on no proof whatsoever, that 1. West has gone insane, fair enough, and 2. That he must consume human flesh in order to slow the melting process. Ted is joined in his search for Steve by Mike, General Michael Perry, that is, who forces Ted to swear secrecy about the matter for reasons. Ted tracks Steve using a Geiger counter. Steve's kind of radioactive now, but only manages to track down the astronaut's discarded ear in a tree branch. Ted soon returns home to his pregnant wife Judy, who knows all about this whole Steve situation. And hey, while this melting maniac is on the loose, why not invite my mother over? Cut to Judy's mom Helen and her boyfriend Harold, who are adorable and killed.
We should be quiet now, okay?
I'm not the one who's doing the talking.
Sheriff Blake, who has long suspected that Ted might know something about all of these messy, half-eaten corpses, orders Ted to come inspect the bodies. Placed in a bind, Ted decides the best course of action is to drug his wife and leave her with General Mike, a man who she barely knows and who's already been hostile towards her. Anywho, while Sheriff Blake is putting the thumbscrews to Ted, a very melty Steve arrives at Ted and Judy's house and kills General Mike. He then saunters off to find another married couple and finishes off the husband, but the wife manages to chop off Steve's arm with a meat cleaver, driving him away. Ted and Blake track Steve down to a power plant, and the sheriff shoots Melty McGuerson, but Steve still manages to get the drop on him, literally. Though, at the last minute, Steve has a change of heart and rescues Ted, who has successfully reminded the Goo Man that they were once Goo friends. But it is for naught. A couple of over-equipped security guards show up, shoot Ted dead, and get eaten by Steve for their efforts. Steve, exhausted and haunted by the NASA rocket countdown, collapses in a slimy heap and completely melts away. The next morning, a janitor finds the remains and casually disposes of them in the garbage, while a radio news announcer reports that another astronaut team is being sent to Saturn. Will mankind never learn?
Meanwhile, in space, softball's back and the satellite of love has it. At least until Tom lobs a softball at Mike that cracks his jaw. Gypsy uncharacteristically disappears after this little accident, so Crow and Tom tend to Mike, but only to make fun of how Mike's injured mushmouth mangles the English language.
Mike, now say I was born on a pirate ship.
I was born on a pirate... Hey, good!
Down in Deep 13, Mother Forrester and son have some good news for Crow. An unnamed studio, let's call it Shammersy, has greenlit the robot's old screenplay Earth vs. Soup. The bad news is the allotted $30 million budget was eaten away by multiple pre-production costs, so Crow's got to make the entire movie for $800. And the studio's insisting on Kevin Bacon to star, which brings the budget down to about $600. By segment 2, a further 45% of the budget is gobbled up when Clayton and Pearl Forrester take a shellcraft up to the Satellite of Love. Everybody fumbles with script pages until the Forresters are called away to a screening. Crow plays director as he tries to shoot his dream project in segment 3. In front of the camera, Mike plays Kevin Bacon playing Mike, and Gypsy plays his love interest, Sweet Marie. Off camera, Tom plays Crow's assistant, Judy. Budget update. Crow spent $800 on a new scarf. As of segment 4, Earth vs. Soup's been shot, edited, and is currently subject to a test screening. Crow's right to be worried because his movie's tested worse than Goodfellas. Given the feedback, the studio has decided to edit Earth vs. Soup down to a trailer and release it as a trailer. Not sure what movie that trailer is going to be paired with, but my money's on Barbed Wire. Hey, since the movie didn't work out, there's always Comedy Central. Oh, never mind.
Well, what did you think of this movie, Adam?
Oh, the movie sucks. The movie blows. But it has its charms. All of its charms are Rick Baker, but it has its charms.
Well, okay. What did you think of the episode that houses the movie?
Oh, it's a brick house. It's delightful. No, I enjoyed this episode quite a lot. There's some great riffs. I was won over, I think, almost immediately when the title card shows up and someone refers to the Incredible Melting Man as George Hamilton. And I was like, oh, that is a sick burn. And like the sketches are great. We'll talk about that more in depth later. But yeah, this is a very well-balanced breakfast.
Yeah, my favorite sequence, I think, would be the exposition scene where the two doctors are just standing on some kind of moving platform for no reason. And every line they say, Mike and the Butts are instantly on it. They instantly have like a second reading for it, and it's so good. Every line is perfect. Followed very quickly by all the riffs they were doing about the floating head in the water. So good. But that said, I can't remember the last time I've been so angry at a movie. Oh, actually, I can. It was that Dumb Ape movie.
What, do you mean like the TV series that became Time of the Apes?
Yes, exactly. And I think for the same reasons. If there's something that makes me really angry at a movie, it's when it can't bother to work out its own story properly.
But there's a man who melts and then he goes on a rampage. What more do you need?
I need a plot to hold together, even if it's just by the, barest of strings.
Or in this case, barest of sinews.
It's just, there's just so many questions that are left hanging, and they would have been so easy to address.
Like what?
So the movie starts in space near Saturn, which it takes like 3 years to get there, right?
Yeah.
It takes a very long time to get to Saturn. The footage they're showing is not Saturn, it's the sun, which would make a lot more sense, right? Because the sun can irradiate you. It's actually a real big problem for astronauts out in space, that there could be like a sunspot or an irradiation thing that could just take you out. Saturn's rings are made of ice. There's nothing there that's threatening. So it just seems so illogical to put it out there. Not to mention that in a couple hours, he's back on Earth, still alive. Like, at least if they had been close to the sun, like, that's a little bit closer. Would have probably still taken a couple months, but it's just... And the fact that, why is he strangely fixated on Ted Nelson, the doctor? Like, does he have a vendetta? Does he not? It never clears. Like, they all know each other.
Yeah,
but
he probably remembers them the way an animal would, so he's all confused and melty.
Yeah, but it's never clear about, like, what the mission was, if it's a secret, but it's not a secret because people on the radio are talking about it. And, like, why would you send someone to space if you have no explanation for what happened to the last crew? It's just, why does he sound like Darth Vader, other than the fact that Vader was a big pull at this time in 1977? Why is he haunted by the NASA countdown? Why would that be haunting?
Well, that's where his life turned to shit.
It turned to shit when he was irradiated by the rings. Why wouldn't he be flashing back to that?
Well, I guess it's less dramatic than having like the audio of the countdown playing over and over again. Otherwise, you just have dead air.
I think it's just simply because that's the most familiar thing. Because he had that line like, "Oh, I'm the only person who ever gets to see this. This is amazing." That could have been more resonant. That's just an example of all the really dumb choices this movie makes for nothing other than trying to wring the most out of already familiar cultural touchstones. And I find that extremely lazy.
So of all the things you mentioned, you did not mention the solid 36 seconds in which characters discuss crackers.
I actually enjoyed that. But yes, this movie made me really angry, but it was helped along by the fact that the Satellite of Love did a very good job on it. Mary Jo Pehl has said that she thinks this is worse than Manos, and I agree.
That's crazy talk. This has got a big goopy melty man in it. Like, stuff kind of happens in this movie.
She also thinks that there's a political reading to this movie that makes her a little bit more forgiving towards it. So she says, like, she thought that this movie had its progressive moments, like it features an African American doctor. It has a person of size. Her words that are using that it's a health professional, and there was one more. Oh, the fact that it was a girl who seems like a very goofy girl who manages to chop off the monster's arm and saves herself. And it also portrays elderly people as having viable amorous relationships. Do you buy that?
No, not even a little bit. I mean, the old couple who just can't wait to get into some of that sweet, sweet old poontang, they're played for yucks throughout the entire movie. They're portrayed as annoying comic relief until they're eventually meltified. I
actually found them like one of the best parts of the movie. He clearly put them on because the director, William Sachs, I feel like he just found some randos and put them in his movie. But they're very charming. And I actually thought that Mike and the Bots were a little bit too mean to them because they were very sweet.
Oh, man, I would say they're not mean enough. I wanted roasted old person flesh for how diabolical they are in this movie. I will say this. I do think the stinger was well chosen, where the very last thing is the old man's kind of double take that he tries when they say, let's get out of here. And he doesn't quite pull it off. But my God, those like extended scenes with the two of them are insufferable.
Yeah, like I see your point that there's representation, but things are always undermining them. Like, first of all, the Black Doctor, that's not that unusual in the 70s to have this. Like, this was when...
That's not even that unusual in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean... This is tokenism. He doesn't get to do anything, really.
And of course, there's the question, just jumping ahead, there's the question about whether or not the nurse, whether or not that scene is supposed to be played for laughs or not. And I just think it's so ineptly made that I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if this is supposed to be for giggles or not.
And even the girl, like, yes, she does manage to cleaver off his arm, but she's also shown as being completely emotionally and psychologically wrecked. By the end, like, you get the sense that they're just going to have to haul her off to like the loony bin after what has happened to her. So I don't know if it's really, I don't know. And
it's the 70s. They were still calling it the loony bin back then. It was not a pleasant place. See, I think the really much more interesting question is this worse than Manos? And it's like, that's something interesting to ponder over because I think they're two very different kinds of bad. This is a generic monster movie. It's got these outlandish special effects that grab your attention, but everything about this is really by the numbers, and everyone in it is pretty forgettable. Manos is a movie about nothing that is recorded as though they were using the dream communication machine from Exorcist II: The Heretic. Like, it's insane. And you don't know if it's really happening when you watch it. So they're I don't know. Like, I would say Manos is such a unique experience that I would consider this to be like, at times it's like, okay, this is the worst movie. But then again, Manos is the worst movie because it's so incoherent. I feel like this movie is worse because it's just using... the plot is just there as a set piece for the special effects. It has no other point, really, than those special effects. But what special effects? Look at them. They look great. It's like watching a pizza being made in real time. It's true. Yeah, honestly, I think you're right. I don't think I'm going to be able to argue logically that which movie is better, but I definitely found Manos to be a more enjoyable experience. I think, like, you know, there's so many different bad movie flavors. Let's just enjoy them all. Let's not compare apples and oranges. All right. Man, I'll tell you, this is a great movie to sit down and watch with a nice tall glass of Clamato, right? Oh gosh, it's so gross. Now, I was really curious about this, and I'll put it to you, Beth. Were you legitimately revolted by the Melting Man and or any of the effects therein? Legitimately revolted. That's an interesting way to put it. I did not want to look at it. No, like, it was just so brown and gooey and just unpleasant, and not in like a fascinating way that you get with some horror movies with like Krueger or anything like that. It's just. Yeah, it just looks like a melting candle. So I mean, some points I had the X factor, so maybe it was successful that way, especially its feet. Oof.
Maybe when Steve loses his eye, it's kind of like, ooh.
Yeah, it's like hanging off him for a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of gory. Okay, yeah, maybe I'll give it like, yeah, at times it's genuinely, unsettlingly gross.
Yeah. So we have this movie. The movie is intended to be upsetting, or at least that's what you would sit down and if you were watching it unmistied, and even what we got from the episode, you'd sit down and go, oh, this was a straight attempt at a horror movie. Not so. Or at least kind of not so. Yeah, because like William Sachs, who wrote and directed this little picture, had originally envisioned this as a horror comedy. Now, I'm looking up the title, and it looks like here it was Google Eyes. Well, that's weird coincidence. No, I have no idea what he was going to call it. I assumed the same title because like this would work in theory as like a campy comedy, as it would as a horror movie, The Incredible Melting Man.
Do you buy that? Like William Sachs's kind of defense for this movie is it was supposed to be a horror comedy, but his studio forced him to pull out some of the funnier bits, which apparently included the heavyset nurse running in slow motion. So there goes your progressiveness right there.
Okay.
But I don't know if I buy it. I think that's just an excuse for why this movie is so terrible. I think a lot of horror movies just have comedic bits because that's just kind of the rhythms you get with these movies, right? You get a lot of tension that has to be released every once in a while with kind of a cheesy laugh. That's not unusual, but the idea that this whole thing was supposed to be funny, it just doesn't have that tone to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just it. That's his argument is that like the script was funny, and then AIP got their hands on it, and they're like, no, horror comedies will not do. And I know that they've had a few horror comedies under their belts that did not do well. So, I mean, I can see it. It's possible. I'm willing to leave that open to the possibility. I don't think that a comedy. I mean, this could go either way. I don't think that a comedy would be as lavish with its special effects as they are here. But then again, at the time, like Rick Baker, one of his big credits was Octoman, where he had just built a goofy suit. So maybe they were hiring him for that. It's hard to say. Perhaps we'll never get down to the true mystery of The Incredible Melting Man.
Oh, you know what? I think I might have to do a 180 on my argument. The other big movie that William Sachs is known for is Galaxina.
Yes, which is a parody movie that he did for Roger Corman back in, I think, 1980.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it. I was intrigued about seeing it because that's kind of a movie genre I enjoy, just like goofy space operas from the 70s and 80s. But from it sounds, it's supposed to be funny, and it never is. Like, the comedy is terrible. Right. So maybe this was supposed to be a horror comedy, and they rightfully thought, no, this isn't funny.
And I think, like, you know, we do get evidence of it there because, like, I don't think that the extended old people driving scene would be as long as it is. Like, odious comic relief shows up in many forms, but it's never this long.
I thought they were sweet.
Oh, man, you would not spend, like, you're just waiting for that monster to just rip them apart. And it never comes like, let's get out of our car and go look at lemons. Okay.
What?
Oh, man.
You're picking lemons in the middle of the night. How can you tell if they're good?
Yeah, I kept expecting one of them to, like, you know, start dancing with lemon wedges in his mouth before dying. Set to, like, a Nino Rota score. Yeah. So I think, like, there are traces of, like, at the very least that is, like, a trace of it. And you certainly have, you know, directors trying this out in the 70s a fair bit. I mean, the horror comedy is not new. Roger Corman dabbled with it a lot in the 1960s, and it came from just experience of his movies would be a lot more successful if he did do, as you say, if he relieved the tension, if he had a moment of comic relief between scares to kind of keep the audience focused on the story and not just kind of not just finding the whole prospect to be monotonous with just one tone.
Right. Or it actually reminded me of Hannah Gadsby's special, which Nanette, which will probably, now that I mentioned it, really date this podcast. It's wonderful if you haven't seen it yet.
She melts for a full hour on stage. That's why.
But she had made the point about how comedy works is that you build tension and then you release it. And in a way, that's what I feel like horror does. Like, so at a certain point, you've built up so much tension that you need a release valve just to keep your audience from being overwhelmed, So, and usually because that release valve is so wanted, you can have really bad or lazy comedy and it'll still hit because the audience wants it to work, right?
Well, that's just it. Like, I remember there's an old website called the Bad Movie Report, and it was done. The reviews were done by a fellow who had himself written quite a bad movie called Forever Evil.
Oh, lovely.
And he's very interested in horror and sci-fi, so he would often point to what he would describe as comedy scenes, and he would always spell it out with a capital K.
Oh, perfect.
Just to denote that this is a different kind of comedy that you're getting.
Yeah.
So like that was there. And I think that in the 1970s, you're seeing people struggle with how to make a horror comedy, especially like here, where horror movies are becoming more intense in the 70s than they were in the 60s. And even prior to that, you have the struggle of like, well, how much violence am I supposed to show if this is horror related? So you have Melting Man, which has some comedy moments in it, but is mostly quite gruesome and kind of grim otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have something like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which sort of purports to be a parody of horror and monster movies in general, but is just so goddamn terrible. It's got that theme song, and that's it. That's all it has going for it.
All right. Glad I never bothered.
But I think that with horror comedies, usually you want to portray things, I think, kind of as straight as possible. And you're bringing the comedy either from the characters reacting normally in an absurd situation, or the director becomes a character in the movie, a la Sam Raimi or Peter Jackson's early movies.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like Evil Dead 2, where, the whole feeling is just surrounded in a very tongue-in-cheek throughout. So there's no question about what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the camera becomes the greatest special effects of all in Evil Dead 2, and it's turning everything into a cartoon. It's providing this much needed exaggeration so that any kind of, I guess, dread is sucked out in favor of kind of a playful surrealism that could go dark or light at any moment, creating a new kind of unpredictability and tension and suspense.
Oh man, dude, you're really good at talking about horror. You should get a podcast.
I know, right? A part of our Scaritage.
Only on Megaphonic.
Wow, we have so many special effects here. We have an entire Rick Baker's dozen.
Oh, tell me why you like this guy so much.
Well, I think his work speaks for itself in this movie. It's great, but also, if you're gonna have a man melt, well, you've got the meltingest man I've ever seen. And Beth, I've seen the movie Street Trash, in which homeless folks buy bottles of bad hooch called Viper that causes them to melt and explode.
Now, I've read some things that suggest that this movie does a real disservice to Baker's work because it's filmed so poorly. Like, the light is not enough. Most of these shots are way too dark. And apparently, AJ Rebar, was impatient and uncooperative with the extensive makeup sessions.
That's true. That's very true.
So they ended up having to cut a lot of the different makeup effects that were supposed to be staged.
Well, that's where we're running into like a bit of confusion, because I watched, there is there was like, someone was kind enough to post the extras from a Japanese release of this movie.
Good Lord. Okay.
And they had a subtitled interview with Rick Baker. So I was watching that with Japanese subtitles. And this was his comment. He was a little bit frustrated with the reviews and commentary that, there's only one, or there's a limited number of like melting man type shots. He's like, no, I built 3 bodies. They're all in the movie. You might not see them very much, but they're all there. We use them. There's different stages. So there's one where the melting man is not so melted, and he has both of his eyes. And there's one where his bones are starting to stick out and still has both of his eyes. And then like the final stage, which occasionally has one eyeball hanging from one socket. He is a Cyclops from that point on. So those are there, and there's also like the hands themselves. At one point, like the hand when it's cut off, they built two different versions of it, because there would be like the hand as it was seen when he's first getting out of the hospital, how his hands look, and then how his hands are far more deteriorated later on. I think they're all there. Most of it, from what I understand, is that they shot all of the special effects stuff last. So there was like very little daylight and very little time to shoot them. So they all had like one take, but I think most of it got shot.
Okay.
Interestingly about Alex Rebar is that apparently he was insisting that he shouldn't have to sit through the makeup process to Rick Baker because he's such a big star in Italy. And, you know, Baker lost his patience with him and says, "You're not in Italy now, and you're playing the melting man."
Fair enough.
Yeah, I looked him up on IMDb, and I can find, you know, a couple of credits before The Incredible Melting Man, one of which is The Young and the Restless. But the earliest thing is something called Microscopic Liquid Subway to Oblivion. It's apparently a real movie, but it sounds an awful lot like this one based on the title.
Dude, you knew what you were signing up for.
He was typecast as Liquidy Dudes. Oh my god, one of his pseudonyms on the IMDb is Just in Case. What a tool. Just in case. Get out of here. Yeah, but I mean, I like a lot of Baker's work. He did incredible special effects for a movie not long after this one, and won the very first special effects Oscar for An American Werewolf in London.
Okay, well, good for him.
Yeah, and you know, he did the makeup on Ed Wood. Tim Burton's Ed Wood, so he didn't do the delightful makeup on the director when he's wearing his Angora sweater. That's before Rick Baker's time. But he did do the very good makeup in Ed Wood, including, I think, doing the smartest thing you could do with someone like Martin Landau, who bears no resemblance to Bela Lugosi, and just kind of heightening his features so that he evokes Lugosi rather than creating like a kind of full-size prosthetic that would recreate Lugosi's face, but totally obscure Landau's.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he did a real smart thing there by just like, no, we'll just enhance Landau's features a little bit so that you're reminded of Lugosi, but Lugosi doesn't eclipse Landau's whole face.
I find them hard to look at, but the special effects are impressive in this movie.
Yeah, they're legitimately nightmarish. Like, there's a version of this movie, I think, where a fella is blasted by space junk. This is so close to like a bunch of other things. Like, this is pretty much the origin of the Fantastic Four.
Basically.
Like, they get blasted by space junk.
Yeah.
They all become monsters.
Something like that. I'm sure in one iteration that's what happens.
Then isn't this the plot of Monster a Go-Go?
I can't.
Guy gets blasted by space junk and he starts wandering around killing people? Or did he?
I think I have blocked the most of that movie from my memory.
Oh, that movie's a delight. But yeah, like Rick Baker has done like a ton of impressive stuff, and he's still active in movies today. One of the things I found interesting, and it wasn't even in the credits, was that his assistant was Rob Bottin, who like essentially started off as Baker's protege and then became like his biggest competitor. Like, I guess to pull the comparison, like, Baker did An American Werewolf in London, and Bottin did the arguably flashier, maybe not as realistic, but certainly flashier effects for Joe Dante's The Howling.
Okay.
Yeah, competing werewolf movies. But Bottin's like masterwork, and I don't think, as good as Baker is, I don't think he has anything that is this impressive. Is that Bottin had a lot of melty works for John Carpenter's The Thing, doing multiple stages of a monster that digests things and then imitates them. So there's a ton of effects in which, you know, things are decomposing and then reconstituting themselves.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's a feast for the eyes.
Well, maybe we should talk about some of these effects and how they were done.
All right, I'll allow it. So we've already gone through, there were different suits for the melting man himself, and they would give him fresh goo. Mm-hmm. And there was a separate hand puppet that was sometimes operated by Rob Bottin for the severed hand. And of course there'd be like a fake eye hanging from the little socket that they made.
Okay.
That's about it.
Practical effects. I was more interested in the actual star field that you only see at the beginning of this movie on the opening credits, because I started to think about how often you see that star field in movies from the late 70s and early 80s, and how that effect actually gets done. And it's apparently really easy.
Yeah, it involves something that looks like a light bright.
Well, basically, yeah, you just punch a bunch of holes in, like pinpoint holes in some black cardboard, shine a light behind it, and then you just zoom in with your camera, and then you could just kind of layer that, and that creates a convincing effect of lights flying by. Now that's when you're going through the stars. If you're going past stars, like if you're on the Enterprise and you're looking out one of the windows and you're just kind of cruising along, they just had like a curtain with lights in it that they would pan slowly across the window, and that's how they created that effect. So very easy effects. And it's really funny because I found about 10 different videos online about how to do this effect in After Effects, like the digital animation program.
Yeah.
So it's definitely moved to digital now.
Wait.
Which is even more funny because this effect could never happen. Like, it's impossible from physics. I have a little thing here. It's from tvtropes.com. So basically, the when things move past you really quickly, like things that are closer to you move by quicker than things that are far away. That's called motion parallax. And for that to happen in space, the spaceship would have to be moving much faster than the speed of light, like really, really fast. Like how they say it, cross the galaxy in a day fast. And because stars are so far apart, that's how fast you'd have to be going to have that effect. And so the irony is in sci-fi shows like Star Trek, even when they're deliberately moving in sublight speeds, you still have that effect, you know, because you have to have some dynamism happening on your screen. So it's more of but I thought this point was really interesting. If you flew so fast that you could see star movement, the actual view would surprise you. The stars before you would brighten and concentrate in the center of the field of view, while the others behind you would dim and diverge all over the field of view. So if you accelerate to the speed quickly, the end result would give you the impression that you were moving backwards.
Ooh.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so funny because it's become something that we expect to see in representations of space, even though it's not something that would actually ever happen if we were able to move through interstellar space in the same way.
Beth, the only question I have, I guess, is about the future, or I guess present day, of this effect. Why would I buy After Effects when I can just use an old curtain?
I don't know, because everyone does everything digitally.
Oh man, I think if nothing else, this movie's a testimony to practical effects.
Yeah, I actually will make a link to this one guy who only has 7 likes. Almost nobody's seen his show, but he actually showed how to do this using practical effects.
Oh, cool.
And good for him, because it looks like it's a lot of fun to put together.
We're going to bring that up to 8 likes, buddy.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 face-melting facts about the movie and the episode, The Incredible Melting Man. Go, Adam, go!
Alex A.J. Rebar, alias Just In Case, who plays the drippy astronaut Steve West in this movie, would eventually go on to write and direct his own. In 2000, he created Sex, Pain, and Murder, a 4-part series of shorts with episode names like Castration Elation and Sex Ain't All That.
Jonathan Demme, the director of Silence of the Lambs and Stop Making Sense, not to mention the classic Married to the Mob, has a credited role as the doofy husband who gets picked off by the melty man upon entering his house.
Writer-director William Sachs's original script was titled Night of the Ghoul, reflecting the primary influence on the depiction of Colonel Steve West, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
American International Pictures, aka Round Guy with Surfboard International, was the exploitation and drive-in powerhouse run by James A. Nicholson and Samuel Z. Arkoff. AIP would distribute a number of movies featured on MST3K, including Bert I. Gordon's colossal films, Young Gary, and many, many Roger Corman productions.
Speaking of Corman, Sachs would helm the ultra-cheesy Galaxina for the prolific producer. Those who see Galaxina take note. The film watched by several of its characters is First Spaceship on Venus, riffed in Season 2.
Who do you want to fix your movie when production goes south? William Sachs, apparently. The Incredible Melting Man director was tasked with doctoring the 1971 monster movie Octoman when the original cut proved to be a disaster. Sachs felt the film was beyond saving, but would later hire Octoman's suit designer Rick Baker to do the goopy FX for Melting Man.
William Sachs claims to have done post-production doctoring on many films in his career. In a rare example of fixing a film while it was still in production, Sachs was tasked with finishing 1984's Exterminator 2 when its original director was fired and the titular exterminator, aka paper chase guy Robert Ginty, refused to come out of his trailer.
As the Melting Man goes on a rampage, Tom quips,
I just hope he eats the Crypt Keeper while he's there.
Both Tales from the Crypt and MST3K were canceled by their long-standing networks in 1996 when each series was in its 7th season.
Bonus Crypt fun fact, boils and ghouls. Tales from the Crypt had its own Melting Man episode, Forever Ambergris, in which Steve Buscemi and The Who frontman Roger Daltrey succumb to an especially melty illness. The very special episode ends with Daltrey's nose falling from his face and plopping into his bathroom sink.
The Mads really didn't like this movie. We're told this is one of Trace Beaulieu's least favorite movies from the show, and Mary Jo Pehl has said that it could nose out Manos as the worst film we have ever done.
Spotting an actor who resembles the late Jonathan Winters, Crow comments,
Should never have done that stint on Mork and Mindy.
in reality, the comedian stint as Mork and Mindy's adult baby Mirth rescued Winters from a career slump caused by his struggle with bipolar disorder.
Also, right before Melty Man gets to some serious melting, Mike riffs,
I just realized I'm Leroy Neiman.
Leroy Neiman was a popular artist who created a lot of impressionistic paintings of musicians and athletes. You might recognize the style if you saw it. And yes, the painter does look like the astronaut in that shot, goofy mustache and all.
Before there were action figures for R-rated blockbusters like Alien and Terminator 2, The Incredible Melting Man inspired a piece of kiddie merchandise of its own, a Halloween costume from Collegeville. The bulk of the costume consisted of red pants and a plasticky shirt adorned with pictures of what remains of Colonel Steve's face. The mask was greenish-yellow rather than blood red, but did have a painted eyeball hanging under one of the mask's eye holes. We'll have a link to this garish little number in our show notes.
And that's slime.
Space. It's big. It's mysterious. I don't know anything about it that I haven't seen in that one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where a guy gets full of brainworms and his head explodes. I don't know what to look for or how anything is. Do you know anything about space? Can you educate me in the ways of space? Is it indeed the place?
Yes. So I was complaining before about how it makes much more sense if this movie had made the astronauts get irradiated from a sun, which is the source of most of the radiation in the solar system, as opposed to Saturn, which is much further away and doesn't irradiate. So I went a little bit down the rabbit hole looking at interesting facts about Saturn's rings and solar flares. Which one would you like to hear about first?
Well, I'm very curious to know more about Saturn's rings, because I've never had any melting experience with that. Only the sun has caused my ice cream to melt, never Saturn.
Saturn, I think, is one of my favorite planets. Actually, I think it's my favorite planet. I like that it's a kind of weird lozengey color. I like that it's squishy, which is apparently because it spins so fast that it kind of flattens at the poles. And of course, it has this beautiful brim of a ring structure compared to all the other planets. And I should say, Galileo first noticed it, many hundreds of years ago through his telescope, and he thought they were handles. Which begs the question, for what? Most people think that it's made out of ice for the most part, but there's this recent theory that it might, and you're going to love this, Adam, that it's made out of the carcasses of dwarf planets.
Oh, right. It's a planetary graveyard.
Yeah.
Just in time for Halloween.
So I was trying to figure out why on earth the director of this movie, William Sachs, would feel the need to bring Saturn into this, even though it just doesn't work with the plot. And the only theory I can come up with, it was made in 1977. 3 years later, the Voyager 1 probe would be streaming on by. So maybe there was just some more interest in the outer planets within the culture that he was trying to tap into. But the pictures this movie uses, which is stock footage of some like flamey things going on, those are solar flares. And you can tell because the footage is so dark, because that's the only way you can actually shoot the sun directly is through a whole bunch of darkening filters. And what you're seeing are solar flares.
Why? Why would they not show Saturn?
Well, they didn't have any footage of Saturn, for one thing.
Why didn't they just make a nice matte painting?
I know. I really do not understand. And what is even more infuriating is when I did some research on what solar flares can do, I'm like, why wouldn't you just use solar flares? So, got this really good article from World Science Festival. We'll put it up about the dangers of solar flares, and they actually are quite dangerous, not just for people in space, but even people on Earth. So solar flares, which are just kind of explosions of matter coming off of the sun's magnetic field, and they look kind of twisty and flamey, are intense bursts of radiation that can last anywhere from minutes to hours. And they're often coincided with something called coronal mass ejections. And now, these are huge explosions of matter, and they can rocket away from the sun at a million miles per hour. When this happens, it kind of really messes around with the solar weather around the inner planets, right? So it has the potential, especially the CMEs or the coronal mass injections, to completely blow out electrical grids. And in fact, this did happen in 1859. There was a solar storm that was dubbed the Carrington effect, and it set auroras flaring as far south as Cuba, and it rendered telegraph lines across North America inoperable. They're saying if something like that happened today, it would probably knock out key transformers, and we would be weeks, perhaps even months without electricity.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How long do you think society would fall? How many minutes do you think it would take?
I think we're going to, we'll probably see a wider effect of what you're seeing in Puerto Rico. Like, people just find a way.
I don't know, man. I turn radical even when my internet won't work.
Well, we've talked a lot about the movie itself, but we should give some attention to these sketches, which unusually for MST3K had like a running plot throughout all of the sketches, which is basically about the making of Crow's long-suffering screenplay, Earth versus Soup.
Mm-hmm. And Mary Jo Pehl writes about this on Satellite News when they published the equivalent of the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide. The host segments were an exercise in healing after our struggle to make the Mystery Science Theater movie. It was a difficult process and not really fun at all. Working with the studio and all the attendant politics and creative roadblocks was really, really frustrating. We didn't have the freedom to be as irreverent and eclectic as we were in the TV show. We had to work with people who had silly names that they had made up for themselves. I remember at one point, while the studio shepherds in charge of MST3K the movie were in Minneapolis, it was during the height of the ubiquitous O.J. Simpson deal. The studio exec informed us over lunch that there was a big trial in Los Angeles with O.J. Simpson because he'd been accused of murdering his wife, and, quote, had we heard anything about it out here? End quote. It was like a hog pile on our souls.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know at the time the kind of difficulties they were having, but if I think back, the first time I heard about the movie was during one of the Turkey Day eras where they were plugging the movie quite a bit, and everyone who did it sounded so disinterested. Like, just really checked out with the whole process. Like, they did not seem enthused about it at all. And that's something I really think about in retrospect, but it's clear that they had to deal with a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, I think that in these sketches, which must have been like something of an exorcism for them, Mary Jo and Trace are super, super funny.
Yeah, they're great. And
Mary Jo is being so passive aggressive that she's terrific. She's so funny and irritating. It's wonderful.
This is Pearl at her best. I mean, like I said, it like when she's doing this kind of humor, it's really her strong suit. It's really too bad for the sci-fi, I think, that they made her basically try to be an over-the-top villain. It just doesn't really suit her.
Yeah, the more you play into Mary Jo doing stuff like when she downplays things, when she's being low-key, she's perfectly used. But she's super funny here. And like just in the way that even like the slightest reasonable objection from Crow will just get a blank stare and a sigh. Like, she's super, super funny. There's this great running joke, though, and I think this is what made the sketches for me, is that Trace is drinking from larger and larger containers of water to the point where he's just drinking out of like an entire like water cooler jug at the very, very end that's almost the size of him.
Yeah. Otherwise, he's kind of subdued, which is maybe he's letting Mary Jo take the lead on this one. I also wondered if he was just quietly starting to check out of the show completely at this point.
Oh, see, I took it a different way. I thought he was playing the kind of unemotional and detached studio exec to perfection there.
Okay. Fair enough. I did feel like they really captured this kind of Kafka-esque sense of bureaucratic malevolence throughout all the sketches in a way that I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah, there's a real sense that this whole thing was doomed from the start, and it ends in the most absurd way possible, which is that, well, we've spent all that money. Let's just put it out as a trailer for a movie that will never exist. And yet you hear that, and then you read about a real life case of like ash can movies. Like, I'm sure you've heard the tale of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four.
There's so many failed attempts of getting the Fantastic Four to actually be a thing that I've kind of lost track. Okay.
So Roger Corman had, I can't remember if it was Corman himself or someone else, but the rights to the Fantastic Four were purchased and time was running out. They had to make a Fantastic Four movie.
What about was this?
This would have been the early 90s.
Okay.
So Corman makes a movie for the express purpose of keeping the rights, and they do it as quickly as possible. And what's weird is that they make a movie that is simultaneously like too silly and too low budget, even for 1994, to have ever been seriously released. But
and this is the era of Xena Warrior Princess.
Yeah, but it also is the only Fantastic Four movie with a convincing The Thing costume.
Really?
Yeah, The Thing looks amazing.
Oh, okay.
He's really well realized, and they've made like several costume and CGI things, and they look terrible in the years since. Roger Corman did it for 50 cents, and it looks great.
So when you say ashcan movies, you just mean movies that were never really intended to be distributed. They're just filling up like a contractual obligation.
Yeah, that's just it. This was made solely to keep the rights.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. Can you imagine being an actor on something like that?
Yeah, they were all pretty disappointed.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm glad that they got to stick it to the studio a little bit with this little sketch. And I gotta say, it didn't slow them down in terms of what they were able to bring for the 7th season. I still think it's like a really rich example of what they're able to do. Even though they're the worst of circumstances, apparently.
Well, I mean, like, after that experience of making this thing that you're an expert in, it's so weird. They're hired to make a slightly higher budgeted version of the thing they are experts on. Everyone involved in the program at that point had been doing it for years. They had it down to a science. And then these outsiders who wanted to ostensibly make the same thing, not even a feature-length version of the show, because the show was already feature-length. They said, okay, we've seen what you could do. We have a number of changes and suggestions we'd like to run by you. It's insanity.
And certainly not the first example of Hollywood taking something that is good and promising and ruining it utterly.
Yeah, that's why we got Mortal Kombat 2 to be such a bad movie.
Aw,
what a bummer. Chris, we've melted this one down to its barest essentials, and I think we've gone over everything that we can say about The Incredible Melting Man and this episode. Do you have one last little gooey gem for us?
I do. I have one last little thing that we can't say, or at least we couldn't show on TV at the time, because I went through and I was watching and looking for some deleted scenes to see what might not have made it. I was expecting to find a lot of really gory stuff, but the most significant scene that happens in the movie that got cut for TV isn't gory at all. It's gross, but it's not gory at all. You might remember there's a scene in which the general flies in, and the first thing they do is they go find to this roadside where the cop is, and where there's a photographer taking pictures.
With the reporter with the great sweater.
The reporter with the great sweater, yes. And there was a scene that was cut where the reporter with the great sweater is doing a photo shoot with the young woman who looks sad in the back of a car that you see for a half second.
Mm-hmm.
In the scene, she's the model, he's the photographer, they're trying to take some pictures, and then he tries to get her to take her clothes off. And she was like, this isn't what I signed up for. And he's like, come on, don't you want to be, it'll be great. It's art. It'll be, don't you want to be famous? All the usual lines. This leads to a bit of physical altercation, and he rips down her tube top and continues to take photos of her while continuing to do this. So, yeah, he's got a great sweater, but he's a terrible character. And, you can't show the breasts on the TV, but I didn't need to see that scene anyway. But you might as well know that it's there in case you're ever thinking of watching the unmisted version of the film.
The incredible Me Too Man.
Mm-hmm. Yuck. Well, that gives this movie a new villain.
Yeah.
Whatever happens to that guy? Because he's unnecessarily obtrusive, even with that scene lost, and they never really do anything with it. And I guess that makes this even worse because he doesn't get his comeuppance at any point.
And that poor fisherman gets his head ripped off, and then his severed head is lovingly exploded in slow motion in an amazing scene.
Could you not do something like sweater guy goes over a cliff and splatters into a zillion pieces while the sweater stays perfectly intact? There's just a lot of things you could do with that.
Yeah, why didn't the melting man eat those kids? That would have been great. I hated those little snots.
I want to hear more about Beth's sweater-based horror films where the sweaters all remain perfectly intact and clean.
Well, it's, the monster is a fan of design, and when he sees it on the wrong person, he gets really upset. And
this is just Fashion Police, the horror movie.
Yeah, exactly. And then that would be the reason why the monster would need to go into that house, because he needs to rip down that butterfly picture.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that is just such a sin of design. The rest of the
house was beautiful.
Well, the rest of the house was like perfectly in keeping with the time. I actually kind of like the low slung couch next to the fireplace. Just like that all works. It's all coherent in its style. But that ridiculous butterfly, my God.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you suffer from the melt of Saturn, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter, still, at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. And you can find Superfan bonus bits from this episode and from most of our earlier episodes if you support us on Patreon. Thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. You can join them by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/38.
Well, Chris, we've exploded all of our fishermen's heads. What's next?
Well, we've watched 38 episodes of this TV show now. Maybe it's time to switch it up a bit. Maybe we should watch a movie. So next episode, let's watch Crow T. Robot's masterpiece, Earth vs. Soup, the thrilling story. No, I'm sorry. I'm being told that the trailer got pulled from YouTube. Apparently the studio sold the streaming rights to Progresso, and you know how they get about their IPs. So anyway, instead, let's watch Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie featuring This Island Earth.
Oh,
Whoa.
Kismet.
My first taste.
Really?
Yeah, this is the first MST3K I ever watched. Remember, this was not airing in Canada, so the only way you could find MST3K is if you took chances on the movie and VHS releases of the episodes.
Yeah, this will be interesting to explore because I had been watching it for a while. That's how I found out about it and got very excited. And it took me a very long time to get a hold of the video cassette because, of course, the movie didn't actually play anywhere near me. And it'll be fun.
Yeah. Big heads, big production values. Oh, my. And the shortest running time yet.
I know. It's so ridiculous.
Well, okay. We'll watch the movie. Maybe y'all should watch it too. And then until next time.
I would gladly give you a smelt or a rich tuna melt if you can give me Alex Rebar's pelt.
And if your gravy is too runny, just add some flour. That'll thicken it right up.
Smelt you later. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Thank you.